So over the last 2 weeks, there have been a number of stories in the news that appear to have come out of the blue. Of course, there's a theoretical possibility that they came out of the blue, but I think it's far more likely that that there are interest groups who are playing a sort of game about power. And in the world today, there's a lot of power to be played for, I mean, the world has been, in any severe economic transformation, sharp economic or political transformation, you're going to have different factions who have power exercising it or trying to exercise it or fighting each other.
Try to maintain it.
Seek to maintain it, seek to extend it, seek to regain it, and seek to sweep the board when they get a chance, you know what I mean? Like Bitcoin, when you got Bitcoin, Elon Musk jumped in. When he jumped in, whoever knew that he was jumping in made a fortune the moment he jumped in.
Yeah.
Of course, everyone around him that you might have told would have made money. And when he withdrew, then they, the same thing. You can make money, you can gain, you can win, you can lose. You can be stuck in the middle. But in the world today where something like 140 companies control 40% of world trade, according to Vitali, a study done in 2008, published in New Scientist, the network control over the largest 32,000 multinational companies that control nearly the whole world economy is concentrated in 140 companies, and then another 780 companies control 80% of world trade. Now, my guess would be that it's a lot more than that now. A lot more concentrated now. So you had this process of Google, Apple, Facebook, the big players, the big tech companies, taking more and more of the world's resources into their hands. And along with that power, and multiplied by the fact that, as Elon Musk has quite correctly pointed out, that artificial intelligence drives at warp speed these same processes and tendencies. So whether it be stock market trading, whether it be banking, whether it be, the military, artificial intelligence is there as a major component in decision making. And also, for example, a friend of mine works in the City of London, advising big companies where to put their money. And in these big companies, big banks, big hedge funds and so on, they'll often have 3 votes at the senior board meeting. 2 will be humans, 1 will be artificial intelligence. So a computer will make one of the decisions, and the 2 guys will sit there and say, do I agree or not? So the 2 guys can veto the machine, but the machine has got a third of the vote. It's like that funny, there's that game where there's that psychological experiment. They've got 3 actors and 1 real person. And you showed a number of mathematical questions, 22 and 22, 44. And they all agree on that first of all. Second time, 44 and 12, 56. And they agree. Third time, 12 and 12, 23. 2 of them say 23. 23. They go, nah, 24. And they look at him, and they do that a few times, and they're completely convincing in saying that they're right, and then the other guy capitulates. So, is that the same process with artificial intelligence? Maybe. And of course, all the time they're feeding you stuff in the machine to tell you this is what you want, this is what you on the basis of the information they've gathered about you, they feed you back what they think. Well, it's not even what they think, it's not a person sitting there. If it was a person sitting there, who would be able to do that, sit there? It's like when they say, you've broken community guidelines. It's not a person sitting there saying you broke community guidelines. It's a machine does it. They've inputted some data, and that machine does it. So at what point does the machine take over? And that's when people think, and that's what Elon Musk is talking about, And the story goes like this. There's a guy called, I'm going to look his name up now, Demis Hassabis. And he's the guy in charge of DeepMind. And DeepMind is the artificial intelligence project at Google. And I'm more and more convinced that the game now is all that. I mean, we've been protesting outside the BBC, which of course is legitimate. But the BBC is a secondary player in the game. The primary players are Google, Amazon, Facebook, and artificial intelligence and the military, and this. They're the big players, not the BBC. It's not the Guardian. You could shut the BBC down tomorrow. It wouldn't make any difference. Some other channel would do the same thing. It's got a certain authority around the world, but not that much authority. And what's the BBC composed of? How many stories they have a day? Like 30 stories, so 30 journalists, a couple of editors, putting it together. The point is how that's curated to the rest of the world. How does the orchestra conductor play it? And that's Google, that's Facebook, that's artificial intelligence. The funny thing was, when I saw an interview with this Demis Hassabis, he said, I think he said he got 3,000 employees, most of whom are specialists in one field or another, geeks. But then he said they've got maybe 24 generalists who don't know just about neurology or networks or computer science or one type of coding or something. They got a broad knowledge, like the idea of Renaissance man. You've got a broad outlook. So they are what we in the Marxist movement used to call cadres. People who've been trained up and have got a knowledge about a broad spectrum of ideas, and they could, for example, be, deployed into a trade union or into a workplace dispute or into a protest movement at the schools, or they could write a leaflet about subject matter. Maybe they got a couple of languages as well, so they could move to another country. Well, a bit more than that. When you're talking about deep mind, you start talking about people who've got very good qualifications and a good brain, and probably got high intellect and a high capacity to observe things and process information and produce something as a result of that. And he basically said that the whole company is dependent on about 20 people. Now, funny enough, it was Dominic Cummings, when he was interviewed after he fell from power, who said the Brexit team that he acquired around him, all based again on data and information and artificial intelligence resources, had a core group of about 12 or 24 people. Again, the same thing. So they got a huge campaign, the Brexit campaign, and the government thereafter. And he basically said the people who ran the Brexit campaign, his little team, also ran the government under Boris Johnson. So here you have a pattern. The pattern is to try and find those who can assimilate the data and process it within the elite sections, who gain influence within different sectors, whether it be in DeepMind, whether it be in the government, whether it be the Brexit campaign, whether it be in Trump's team, whether it be in the army, whether it be in artificial intelligence in general, whether it be in a company. And the funny thing was, then connected to that, was that Dominic Cummings said about the pandemic, in inverted commas, we didn't know what we were doing. Suddenly it was, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know, I don't know anything. We didn't know what we were doing. And then he said, and along came the Bill Gates type network. In other words, Bill Gates' network. Who's Bill Gates' network? It's a global network established by his multi-billion-dollar investments in not only in computing, but also in every other sector. Bill Gates has got investments in every single sector, but most of all in pharmaceuticals, in healthcare, in these charitable institutions, in global warming, green type theories and operations. He's got everything from like plans to change the weather to pandemic preparedness plans, and that's why he can appear all over the place to be brilliant, because he can appear that way. I don't think he's particularly brilliant. He seems to me not so competent after all. But the point is, the money buys the skills.
Right.
You can buy these people and get them to work for you. You pay them £2 million a year each, plus a proportion of the shares based on what they turn up. They've got a budget underneath them to acquire skills and knowledge. They acquire them from universities. They acquire them from different sectors of science and technology. And in that way, you create an unstoppable machine backed by huge amounts of resources, and which assimilates and develops a cadre of the ruling class. And this cadre of the ruling class is it's organised into segments. So one would be the Gates network, the other would be the Cummings network, which is largely fallen by the way, not disappeared, but it's largely fallen by the wayside with the fall of Cummings. Now we've got the Carrie Simmons, she's assimilated around it, but of course that's also connected to the traditional British ruling class, and the conservative ruling class. You've got the aristocracy in Britain. There's several thousand of them, and amongst them you've got a little layer, some of whom are quite smart, I suspect, actually, that some of these people like Sir Charles Walker and that lot, I don't know enough about him to say so, this is pure speculation. People like that might have connections to that type of layer. And then you've got, like, in the green world, you've got all the big wigs from Davos and all the rest of it, and Prince Charles, and, from Prince Charles to Greta Thunberg to, to Charles Schwab. Klaus Schwab, sorry. And Klaus Schwab's got his networks.